Hello! Today is the first video for this YouTube account and we're going to be starting with the very basics. So this is for the beginners. We're going to be doing simple outlining and flooding of a cookie. Okay, so for today's cookie, you're going to want to have icing in two different consistencies. We've got an outline consistency and a flood consistency. Some cookie decorators will do all of their outlining and flooding with the same consistency, and it's really just a matter of preference. Personally, I find I have more control with two, and I like to flood the whole surface of the cookie in a looser consistency. Okay, so a turntable is something that can be really helpful when you're decorating cookies, just because it makes it really easy for you to get to all the angles. This one I got from Michael's Craft Store. I get asked that a lot. It's good. It has a little bit of a non-stick grip here. And it just allows me to spin my cookie around. So you're going to press down on the spot where you want to start. Now, I think for people that haven't decorated cookies before, what you often want to do is kind of like keep the bag along the cookie and draw like you would with a pen. And that's not, I mean, it will work, but you're actually going to get a cleaner line with sugar cookies if you actually lift your piping bag up and sort of drag that line of icing along where you want it to land on the cookie. So let me demonstrate that. So I'm going to press down here and squeeze on my piping bag with just enough pressure to get a consistent line coming out of it. And now see how my bag is not touching the cookie, but I'm going to drag and direct that line of icing around my cookie, and then I'm going to touch down where I want that to end. And that's going to get actually a smoother line than if you press and just kind of continue to touch the cookie. If you can see that difference. If you make a mistake with your outline, it's really easy just to wipe away what you did, and then you can just go right over top. So I'm going to come to this side and I'm going to press down again and squeeze with a consistent pressure. And I'm just going to pull that icing rope and let it fall to where I want it to fall, and then touch down at the end. And there we have our flooded cookie. Sometimes when you're flooding a cookie and it has a really narrow space in it, I'm going to show you a different cookie here as an example. This piece here is what I would consider to be a narrow flooded area. Sometimes when you flood that, you might get something called cratering in the cookie when the icing dries, and that is where some of the moisture gets sucked out of the center and you get what actually looks like a crater or a hole in your icing. And so if you're flooding an area that is small like that, you might want to also use your outline consistency and fill in a section in the middle of that narrow area where you're likely to get that cratering. I probably won't get that cratering on this cookie, but it's not going to hurt to fill it in and just be cautious. So then I'm going to take my flood consistency, and I've mixed it up because we talked about that you do get that separation a little bit if it's been sitting. When I flood, I like to flood with a looser consistency than some other cookie decorators. And so in some tutorials, you'll see cookie decorators going right up against the edge of their outline with their flood and filling it in. And they generally are using a slightly thicker flooding consistency than what I like to use. And I find that flooding consistency is totally preference, but for me it's easiest to get a nice smooth finish if I use a looser consistency. So because I'm using a looser consistency and I don't want it running off the edges of my cookie, I'm actually going to stay away from the edge, and I'm going to just flood my cookie in the center. And I'm going to use what I imagine to be enough that I can fill out my cookie, but not so much that it's going to run over the edge. And then I can always add more in after. So now I'm going to take this scribe, pull that icing toward my outline, and just touch it and work my way around my cookie. And then I don't worry about it running off the edge because I know I haven't overfilled it. And this is also where I think the amount of meringue powder in your icing recipe comes into play. I find that having a higher amount of meringue powder, or at least 1/3 of a cup, really helps my icing keep a good puffy shape and helps me to kind of mold it into where I want it to go, even when it has a looser consistency like this. So we're just gonna keep pulling our icing. I kind of whip it around, like whip my scribe while I'm pulling it, just to kind of fill it up, make it a little fluffy and puffy again. Okay, and then you can always add a little bit more. So if you're like, it's kind of not as full as I want it, you can add a little bit more at this point without really worrying about it going over the edge. And then just kind of move your scribe around until it smooths out. And that is the basics of outlining and flooding a simple beginner cookie. So I hope you found that useful if you are just getting started with your cookie decorating. And if you are interested in learning how to decorate cookies, then please make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for lots of tutorials to come.